The man in the hallway's rain outside fell hard and fast, tapping against the windows like tiny fingers knocking for attention. Inside Mercy Grace Hospital, the hallways were bright and polished, yet cold and hurried. Nurses pushed carts, doctors called out orders, and patients sat waiting with tired eyes and heavy hearts. Everyone was rushing, except one man. He stood near the reception desk, quietly holding a paper in his hand. His beard was slightly unshaved, his hair still damp from the rain. He wore a simple gray hoodie, dark jeans, and a pair of old sneakers. To most people, he looked like someone who had wandered in by mistake. No one recognized him. Not yet. A nurse passed by and looked him up and down. She gave a polite smile but didn't stop. The receptionist, busy on the phone, didn't even glance at him. Finally, a security guard approached. "Sir, are you lost? This area's for patients and staff only." The man smiled softly. "I'm waiting for someone." "It's okay." Before the guard could press further, a voice echoed from the far end of the hallway, loud, sharp, filled with annoyance. "You again?" The voice snapped. It was Dr. Ethan Wright, one of the hospital's top surgeons. Tall, confident, always dressed in an expensive suit under his white coat, he walked like someone used to power. He was known for his skill and his ego. He didn't like interruptions. And he didn't like strangers standing near his department. "Listen, Dr. Wright," said, walking straight toward the man in the hoodie. "I don't know who keeps letting people like you in, but this isn't a shelter. This is a private hospital, high-end. We don't do walk-ins off the street." The man didn't flinch. He simply looked at the doctor and said quietly, "I'm not here for a checkup." "Then what are you here for?" Dr. Wright asked, folding his arms. "Look, we've got real work to do here. I've got surgery scheduled, patients waiting. This isn't the place to loiter. If you want help, go to the public clinic down the road." The receptionist turned red but stayed silent. A nurse who overheard the exchange paused briefly, her eyes wide, but she hurried away before getting involved. The man glanced down at the paper in his hand. Then he folded it, tucked it in his pocket and said, "Thank you, doctor. I'll find my way." And just like that, he turned and walked down the hallway, calm, silent, unnoticed again. But he had already seen what he needed to see. An hour later, the hospital administrator received a call. Her hands trembled slightly as she hung up. She gathered the top staff for an emergency meeting. Dr. Wright was among them, still annoyed and unaware of what was coming. "We just received confirmation," the administrator said. "Our hospital has officially been acquired, effective immediately." "What? By who?" Dr. Wright asked, frowning. The administrator looked at him, then at the others in the room. "By Keanu Reeves," she said. A stunned silence spread like wildfire. "The actor?" someone whispered. "Not just an actor," the administrator said. "He's a silent investor in multiple medical foundations. Last year, he bought stakes in several hospitals quietly. This one was finalized just this morning. He came in today to observe." Dr. Wright's face lost color. "Wait, are you telling me that the man I just threw out was—" "Yes," the administrator said. "You insulted the new owner of this hospital." The room went completely still. Back in a small room on the hospital's top floor, Keanu Reeves sat quietly, reviewing patient files. He wasn't just here for ownership. He was here for something personal. His sister had died years ago in a hospital hallway, waiting for care she never received in time. She was poor. The staff hadn't rushed. They hadn't listened. He never forgot the way she looked, alone, ignored, and invisible. This hospital was his chance to change that. For someone else. He didn't want his name on plaques or his face in the lobby. He wanted better treatment for people who couldn't afford to shout. People who were pushed aside. And today, he had already seen what needed to change. That night, Dr. Wright sat in his office, sweating. He replayed the moment again and again, the words he had used. The way he had judged a man by his clothes. His phone buzzed. It was a message from the administrator. The new owner has requested a private meeting with you tomorrow morning. 7 a.m. Sharp. Dr. Wright didn't sleep that night. He knew that everything was about to change. Asterisk the meeting at sunrise. Sun was still hiding behind the clouds. When Dr. Ethan Wright walked into the hospital the next morning, the usually confident, sharp-tongued surgeon now looked like a student waiting to be punished. His steps were slower. His eyes had bags under them. He hadn't slept at all. His white coat was freshly pressed, and his tie was perfect, but none of it could hide the storm going on inside him. He made his way up to the top floor. It was a quiet area usually reserved for executive meetings and private visits. Today, one of those rooms had been cleared out for a single man, Keanu Reeves. As Dr. Wright reached the glass door, a young assistant nodded and opened it without a word. Inside, the room was simple, no fancy decorations. Just a large wooden table, 2 chairs, and a window that showed the early morning rain beginning to fall. Keanu Reeves stood at the window, looking out. He wore the same hoodie from yesterday. He turned as Dr. Wright entered. "Doctor," he said, his voice calm. "Mr. Reeves," Dr. Wright replied, forcing a smile. I'd like to start by apologizing. I had no idea who you were." Keanu took a moment before he spoke again. "That's the thing, Doctor. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." Dr. Wright lowered his eyes. "I wasn't trying to be rude," he said softly. "I was under pressure. I've got patients. Surgeries. My work, your work is important." Keanu interrupted. "I know that. But what I saw yesterday, it wasn't about pressure. It was about pride, Doctor." Wright nodded slowly. There was no use in arguing. He had said what he said, in front of staff. In front of strangers. To a man who had done nothing wrong except stand silently. Keanu pulled out a folder from the table and placed it between them. "I'm not here to take revenge. I'm here to bring change, and I want you to be a part of it." The doctor looked up, surprised. "You still want me here? You're a skilled surgeon, one of the best in the city. But skill doesn't mean much without compassion." Keanu opened the folder. It had new hospital policies, free treatments for low-income patients, extended care for the elderly, a kindness training program for all staff. "This is what I want to build here," he said. "A place where no one gets ignored. Not because of how they look, or what they wear, or what's in their wallet." Dr. Wright leaned back in his chair, stunned. "You're serious about this?" "Completely," Keanu said. "I lost someone once because a hospital didn't care enough to listen. I won't let that happen again, not here." A silence filled the room. But it wasn't heavy. It was honest. "I'm in, Doctor," Wright finally said. "I want to do better. I didn't expect this from you." Keanu smiled slightly. "I know what it feels like to be invisible. And I know what it means when someone finally sees you." Word about the meeting spread through the hospital by lunch. No one expected Dr. Wright to return with a softer look in his eyes. He didn't yell in the hallway that day. He didn't bark orders. Instead, he sat with a nurse who had been struggling. He listened. Really listened. The staff were shocked. It was like watching a different man. And Keanu Reeves? He didn't sit behind a glass office. He walked the floors. He visited patients. He sat in waiting rooms beside strangers and asked them how they were doing. He bought coffee for nurses. Working overtime, he watched. He learned. He remembered names. "You're the owner?" An elderly woman asked him when he helped her adjust her blanket. "Just a guy trying to help," he replied with a gentle smile. One evening, a young woman came rushing through the emergency room doors. She held a little boy in her arms. His face was pale, his breathing fast. "Please," she cried. "He has asthma, but I can't afford treatment. I don't have insurance. Please don't turn us away. The front desk nurse froze for a moment, unsure. Protocol said they needed at least a down payment before admission. But then Keanu appeared, quietly standing behind her. He looked at the boy, then the mother. Get them in right now, he said gently. Everything's covered. The woman's eyes filled with tears. But why? Because you shouldn't have to choose between your child's life and your bank account. As the staff rushed the boy in, the mother broke down in the hallway. Keanu knelt beside her and offered her a bottle of water. He's going to be okay, he said softly. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing us. He didn't reply. He just sat there beside her, silent and steady, like a lighthouse. In a storm. The weeks passed, and the hospital changed, not in its walls or machines, but in its heart. Patients were treated like people. Janitors were greeted by name. Interns felt heard. And doctor, right? He began mentoring new doctors, teaching them more than just surgery, teaching them empathy. But change wasn't easy for everyone. One senior doctor, Dr. Raymond, didn't like it. He believed Keanu's kindness culture was slowing down performance. He rolled his eyes during meetings, whispered complaints behind Keanu's back. He didn't know that Keanu was listening. He didn't know what was coming. A whisper in the hallway started with whispers. They floated down the hospital corridors like drifting smoke. Harmless at first, then sharp. He's just an actor, doctor, Raymond muttered one day as he signed off on a chart. This hospital doesn't need a Hollywood showrunner telling us how to treat patients. The nurse nearby stayed silent, but she looked uncomfortable. Dr. Raymond continued anyway, his voice louder now. We're here to save lives, not win applause. All this kindness talk is slowing us down. Soon we'll be handing out free hugs instead of medicine. Keanu had just stepped around the corner when he heard those words. He didn't pause, didn't make a scene. He simply turned back and walked away, but he didn't forget. Later that evening, Keanu walked quietly into the janitor's storage room. Inside, the smell of cleaning chemicals and old mops filled the air. An elderly man named Javier stood beside a mop bucket, humming to himself. Hey Javier, Keanu said with a smile. Javier turned. Mr. Reeves, or should I say boss, what brings you down here? I need your help, Keanu said. You know this place better than anyone, Javier chuckled. Been cleaning these floors longer than some of the doctors have been alive. I want you to tell me something, Keanu said, his tone now serious. Not as an employee, but as a person. Sure, Javier said, leaning on his mop. Who really cares around here? Keanu asked. Who smiles at the patients when no one's watching? Who checks on the lonely ones? Javier's face grew thoughtful. He tapped the mop against the ground gently. Nurse Layla always hums to the kids. And young doctor, Han, quiet guy, but he brings extra food for patients with no family. And then there's single quotes S. Dr. Raymond. Keanu raised an eyebrow. Raymond? Yeah. Javier nodded slowly. I know he's sharp-tongued. But last week, a homeless man collapsed outside. Raymond carried him in on his back. Didn't even wait for help. Keanu said nothing at first. Then he nodded, thoughtful. Thank you, Javier. He turned to leave, but Javier added one last thing. Don't judge a tree by its thorns, boss. Sometimes they protect the fruit. The next day, Keanu called a meeting. Not in a conference room, not with spreadsheets. He asked all senior staff to gather in the children's ward, where tiny beds lined the walls and teddy bears sat on shelves. The staff were puzzled. Dr. Raymond stood in the back, arms crossed. Keanu walked in with a little girl. She had no hair, a scar across her chest, and the brightest smile in the room. Her name was Mia. I want you all to meet someone, Keanu said. This is Mia. She was told last year she wouldn't make it, but she's still here. The doctors smiled politely. Nurse Layla wiped her eyes. Keanu knelt beside Mia and whispered something. She giggled and nodded. Double quotes, Mia wants to say something. Keanu announced. The little girl stepped forward and said, "Thank you to the doctors who talked to me like I'm not just a problem. Thank you to the nurses who braid my wig and bring me stickers. Thank you for being kind." The room went quiet. Then came soft applause. Keanu stood. "This," he said gently, "is why we do what we do." His eyes slowly turned toward Dr. Raymond. "And sometimes," Keanu added, "even the strongest voices need reminders. I heard some things this week. And while words can hurt, actions speak louder." Dr. Raymond shifted uncomfortably. Keanu walked up to him. "I know you care, I've seen it. But the others are watching you. And when you lead with bitterness, they learn to do the same." Dr. Raymond looked down. "I didn't mean to disrespect your vision." "It's not about me," Keanu replied. "It's about them. The ones who have no voice." Later, in his office, Dr. Raymond sat staring at his desk. He pulled out a small envelope from his drawer. Inside was a photograph of his daughter, now gone from cancer. She had once been a patient in this same hospital. He remembered the nights he had held her hand. How she smiled even through pain. How he once yelled at a nurse for bringing her the wrong juice. How that nurse still returned with a hug. He remembered what kindness looked like, and what it felt like to lose it. He stood up and walked toward Keanu's temporary office. He knocked. "Come in." Keanu said. Dr. Raymond entered, holding the photo. "You were right," he said. "I let my pain turn into pride. And it cost me my compassion." Keanu looked at the picture. "She was beautiful," he said. "Her name was Elena," Raymond replied. "She loved your movies. Said you always looked like someone who'd understand." Keanu's eyes glistened. "I hope I still do." And in that moment, the room held not two professionals, but two fathers, one who had lost, and one who had learned. Outside, life at the hospital kept moving. But something was different now. The tone, the rhythm. A teenage boy sat on a bench, crying. Softly. A doctor passed by, paused, and returned. He sat beside him and handed him a chocolate bar. "You're not alone, kid," he said. And for the first time in years, that doctor's name was Raymond. What can't be taught in medical school. A few days later, Mercy Grace Hospital was alive. With a quiet energy. Not the usual rush of beeping machines and hurrying staff, but something softer. Something more human. It began with small things. Doctors spending a few more minutes with patients. Nurses laughing in the break room again. Orderlies being greeted with thanks. Even the vending machine area had a warm buzz where people shared stories instead of just snacks. KeanuReeves still walked the halls like a shadow, silent, watchful, never above anyone. Patients began to recognize him more now, not for his movies, not even for owning the hospital, but for listening like it actually mattered. On Tuesday morning, the emergency room was especially tense. A young boy had been brought in after a terrible car crash. His name was Elijah. Only 8 years old. His body was shaking from internal bleeding. The parents were still at the accident site. He had no guardian present. Dr. Han, the youngest and kindest doctor on staff, was called in. "We need surgery now," he said urgently. But there was a problem. Hospital policy required parental consent for non-life-threatening surgery on a minor unless overridden by the board or senior leadership. Dr. Han called the administrator. She said the board wouldn't approve it without a signature. He hung up, torn between duty and rules. The boy's pulse was dropping. Then Keanu stepped in. "Do it," he said, standing just behind Dr. Han. "But we need approval," Dr. Han said. "You've got it," Keanu replied. "But who are you to override the board?" The nurse asked, confused. Keanu pulled out his wallet and showed the silent document he always carried. Primary shareholder. Full voting rights. Emergency Override Authority.dr. Han blinked. Thank you, he whispered, and rushed Elijah into surgery. Keanu stood in the hallway, hands clasped. For 3 hours he didn't move. Not even to sit. When the surgery ended, Dr. Han walked out, sweat on his forehead, but a smile on his face. He's going to make it, he said. Keanu didn't smile. Not right away. He just closed his eyes and nodded. As the boy was wheeled past, Keanu knelt down and gently placed a small toy car in his hand. A nurse looked at him, stunned. That's the same car your sister had, she whispered. She had heard the story. She had seen the photo on his desk once. I know, Keanu said quietly. But not everyone was moved by kindness. In the background, a few high-level investors began whispering behind closed doors. He's making this a charity, not a business, one said. Too many free treatments. No return on investment, another added. We should reconsider the leadership. He's not a doctor, he's an actor. An emergency board meeting was called without informing Keanu. Their plan? Vote to reduce his powers, limit his authority, force him into a symbolic role while they retook control. But something happened. They didn't expect. Nurse Layla overheard the plan. She wasn't the type to get involved with politics. But she had seen enough. She had seen Keanu kneel beside dying children, buy food for a janitor's daughter, help repair an old vending machine with his bare hands because a homeless woman said it ate her last dollar. Layla rushed to Dr. Wright and told him everything. The next morning, Keanu walked into the boardroom without knowing what was planned. 10 people sat around a long table, stiff suits, guarded expressions. He smiled politely. Good morning. Before anyone could speak, Dr. Wright walked in behind him. I'll be joining this meeting, he said. The investors looked confused. This is not a medical matter. No, Dr. Wright said calmly. It's a human matter. Keanu stood still, quiet, not confused, just curious. Dr. Wright cleared his throat. Before you begin whatever vote you planned, there's something you should hear. He turned on the screen behind him. Video clips played. Clip 1. Keanu hugging an old man who had no visitors for weeks. Clip 2. A teenage patient with leukemia smiling as Keanu helped her paint the hospital wall during her last week. Clip 3. Staff interviews, unscripted, honest. He changed us, Nurse Leela's voice said in one clip. Not just the rules. The heart. Clip 4. Dr. Raymond in tears, speaking directly to the camera. This hospital saved my soul. Because he reminded us why we started wearing these white coats. The room fell silent. Finally, Dr. Wright looked at the investors. If any of you think this hospital would be better without him, speak now. Not one word came. Keanu looked around, then said softly, I'm not here to take power. I just want to bring care. If you ever feel that I've failed in that, I'll walk away right now. An old investor at the end of the table stood up slowly. He had been silent the whole time. His name was Mr. Harrison. He had watched from the shadows. He looked at Keanu. I had cancer 3 years ago, he said. I told no one. Came here as a stranger. He sat with me. Helped me eat when I couldn't hold a spoon. I didn't tell him who I was, and he didn't care. He turned to the others. This man owns more than the building. He owns our respect. The motion is denied. Keanu said nothing. His eyes held gratitude, not pride. That night, as Keanu walked out into the rainy parking lot, a small voice called out, Mr. Reeves. It was Elijah, the boy from surgery. His mother stood beside him, holding his hand. I'm better, Elijah said. They said you helped. Keanu knelt beside him. You were strong, he whispered. You helped yourself. Elijah handed him a small drawing. A stick figure with long hair, a hoodie, and a big heart on its chest. That's you, he said. Keanu took the drawing gently. I'll keep this forever. But just when everything felt peaceful, a letter arrived at the hospital front desk. The next morning, it had no return address inside. A single sheet of paper. This hospital turned away my son 3 years ago. He died outside your doors. I've never forgotten. And now that I hear it's changed, I'm coming to see if it's true. It was signed only, a broken father. And no one knew. The storm that was about to enter. The man at the edge of grief. Morning began softly, like most days at Mercy Grace Hospital now did. Sunlight warmed the polished floors. Children laughed in the pediatric wing. A nurse gave a lollipop to a shy boy after his checkup. Everything seemed calm until the man walked in. He wore a long coat, worn at the sleeves. His eyes were cold, fixed. His face held pain that had no words. He didn't speak at first. Just walked to the front desk and gently handed over a letter. "Someone here got this," he said. "I wrote it." Nurse Kelly read it, then froze. She had seen the message days ago, handed it to the administrator, and then it faded from her mind. But now the man behind it was real. "Flesh, blood, and heartbreak. Please have a seat," she said, her voice gentle. Double quotes. "No," the man replied. "I'll stand. I didn't come to sit. I came to ask why." Kelly quietly called upstairs. "You need to come down," she told Keanu. "He's here." Within minutes, Keanu Reeves appeared near the elevators, walking slowly. He looked at the man and instantly understood. Not the details, but the pain. "You must be the one who wrote the letter," Keanu said. The man nodded. "My name's Harold. 3 years ago, I brought my son here, 10 years old. Asthma attack. They told me to wait. Said paperwork needed signing. By the time someone helped, he was gone." The hallway grew silent. Keanu stepped closer. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I wasn't here then, but I am now." Harold's eyes didn't soften. "Sorry, won't bring him back. You people smile now. Paint walls. Offer tea to patients. Where was that when my boy was gasping for air outside your doors?" "You're right," Keanu said quietly. "We failed him. And we failed you." Harold took a shaky breath. "I thought I'd come here and burn the place down with my words. Yell at everyone, scream at God. But then," he pulled out a small folded paper. "Then I saw this posted near the children's wing. A picture, your handwriting. It said, 'This hospital exists now for the forgotten, the silenced, and the unseen.'" He looked up. "I was one of them." Keanu nodded. "So was I." They walked together to the hospital's memorial garden. A quiet place with flowers, benches, and a wall filled with names of those who didn't make it. "We added this 6 months ago," Keanu said. "Because grief shouldn't be hidden. And love doesn't disappear when someone's gone." Harold stepped closer to the wall. There was an open space. Keanu handed him a pen. "Write his name," he said softly. Harold's hand trembled as he carved. "Isaiah, forever 10. And for the first time since he arrived." He cried, not with rage, but with release. Keanu didn't say anything more. He just stood beside him. And sometimes, that's all someone needs. Later that afternoon, Harold visited the pediatric ward. He sat with children who reminded him of his son. He laughed, told stories, handed out little toy cars he'd brought in. A paper bag. The nurses watched, stunned. One whispered, "That man came in like a storm. Now he's a shelter." Keanu watched from a distance, his heart full. Not with pride, but with peace. That same night, trouble returned. 2 men entered the hospital around 10 p.m. They weren't patients. They weren't visiting anyone. They carried hidden weapons. Security footage would later show them pretending to be delivery workers. They bypassed the front desk and headed straight to the admin floor. Their target wasn't a person. It was data, hospital records, insurance contracts, Keanu's private donations. They had been paid by someone on the outside. Someone who still didn't like the new changes. Someone who wanted to find something they could twist into scandal. As the two men reached the records room, the lights flickered, and Keanu Reeves stepped out of the shadows. He wasn't alone. Javier, the janitor, stood beside him, mop in hand like a staff. "You don't belong here," Javier said. One man reached into his coat, but then came a voice behind them, hands in the air. Shouted, "Drive!" Han, holding the hospital's emergency security pager. Within seconds, the alarm triggered. Guards swarmed in. The two men were caught. Keanu stood quietly as police arrived. The officers asked, "You knew they were coming?" Keanu nodded. "When you clean up the place, the dirt tries to come back." News of the incident spread. But it wasn't the break-in people talked about most. It was what happened after. Keanu invited every staff member, from doctors to laundry workers, into the cafeteria the next day. He stood before them, holding a small piece of broken glass. "This," he said, "was left behind during last night's mess. It could have hurt someone, just like unspoken wounds can." He placed it gently on the table. "We're not just healing patients here. We're healing each other. And every day we choose kindness, we make this place safer. Not just from people with bad intentions, but from a world that forgets to care." There was no applause. Just quiet respect. That evening, Nurse Layla found a small card on her desk. No name. Just a quote: "To care for someone you don't know is the highest form of humanity." She looked out the window and saw Keanu walking with Harold. The two men now bonded not by power or past, but by shared pain, and a deep promise to protect others from it. But as the stars rose that night over Mercy Grace, another letter arrived. This time, it wasn't anger. It was from a little girl who had returned home. Inside, a hand-drawn picture of Keanu, the hospital, and hundreds of smiling people under a banner that read, "Thank you for making the place that made me better." Keanu placed it on the wall beside Isaiah's name and whispered, "We're not done yet." The hospital that love built morning sky was soft with golden light as birds landed on the rooftop of Mercy Grace Hospital. Inside, the hospital was buzzing, but not with panic or noise. It was something else. Something warm. Patients smiled at each other in the waiting area. A man in a wheelchair gave a thumbs up to a passing nurse. A janitor and a young resident shared coffee in the break room like old friends. And in the middle of it all was Keanu Reeves walking silently, his hoodie sleeves slightly rolled up, his eyes calm, but always observing. That morning, a small ceremony was being prepared outside in the hospital's garden courtyard. It wasn't a fancy event. No press, no red carpets. Just patients, staff, and a few chairs under the open sky. The hospital was dedicating a new wing for long-term pediatric care, something Keanu had quietly planned and funded himself. But the crowd didn't know what was coming. As chairs filled up, Harold, the man who had once come to confront the hospital in pain, now stood near the front, holding a small photo of his son, Isaiah. Beside him sat Dr. Raymond, once filled with ego, now quietly holding his late daughter's bracelet in his hand. Dr. Han arrived with a box of thank you letters from patients. Nurse Layla brought balloons. Javier, the janitor, had polished every tile in the entrance himself. And Keanu? He was sitting beside a young boy named Eli, someone who had survived the surgery he had authorized weeks ago. Eli leaned over and whispered, "Are you nervous, Mr. Keanu?" Keanu smiled. "A little, don't be. You're like Batman." But with hugs, Keanu laughed gently. "That's the best thing anyone's ever said to me." The hospital administrator stepped forward and spoke to the crowd. "Today we open the New Hope Wing. This space will offer treatment to children who need long-term care, regardless of insurance, background, or money. But this wing isn't just bricks and beds. It's the result of one man's heart." She paused. "Keanu Reeves didn't just invest in us, he believed in us. He reminded us that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about kindness. Everyone stood and clapped. Keanu stepped up, but he didn't take the stage. Instead, he stood on the ground beside the staff. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice steady. "But this isn't about me. This is about every person who ever felt invisible in a place that was supposed to care." He turned toward the wall where Isaiah's name was carved. He touched it gently. "This boy reminded me that the ones we lose still guide us, and the ones we save us in return." He turned back to the crowd. "We won't always get it right, but we'll never stop trying." A small silence followed. Then, from the back, a child's voice yelled, "We love you, Mr. Keanu." And laughter broke out like sunshine after rain. As the crowd mingled afterward, Dr. Raymond approached Keanu with a strange look on his face. "There's something I need to show you," he said. They walked to Raymond's office. He pulled out a sealed brown envelope from a drawer. "My daughter wrote this before she passed," he said. "I never opened it. I couldn't. But after everything... I think she would want you to read it." Keanu slowly opened it. The letter was in childish handwriting. "Dear Daddy, I know you're sad and scared, but I want you to promise me something. When I'm gone, be kind, not just to patients, to everyone. Because maybe, just maybe, if we're all kind, hospitals won't feel scary anymore." Keanu folded the letter carefully, his hands trembling. "Thank you," he whispered. Dr. Raymond smiled, a single tear falling. "No, thank you." Weeks passed. Then months. Under Keanu's guidance, the hospital transformed in ways no one thought possible. Mercy Grace became a symbol not of perfection, but of purpose. Hospitals around the country began reaching out to learn from them. News spread about the once forgotten place that became a home for the broken, the poor, the grieving, and the hopeful. Keanu never once stepped into a spotlight, never held a press conference. He just kept walking those halls, listening, remembering. One night, long after visiting hours, Keanu sat alone in the chapel. Rain tapped softly on the window. He lit a small candle and closed his eyes. His sister's face appeared in his mind, her laugh, her strength. "We're trying," he whispered. "I hope you see it." Suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. It was Harold. "I come here sometimes too," Harold said. "To feel close to Isaiah." Keanu nodded. "I think they're both proud of you." They sat in silence, two fathers who had turned their pain into something sacred. Outside, a nurse walked a young girl down the hallway toward her room in the New Hope wing. The girl asked, "Who started this hospital?" The nurse smiled. Man who didn't want to be seen. He just wanted people to feel seen." The girl thought for a second. "What's his name?" "Keanu," the nurse replied. "Keanu what?" "Just Keanu," she smiled. "Like how angels don't need last names." And on the hospital wall, beside Isaiah's name and the thank you drawings, was a new plaque. It read, "This place was built not by hands, but by heart, in memory of those we lost, and in hope for those still fighting." Beneath it, in small letters, "Founded with love by Keanu Reeves."